Hi, it's Dr. Bernstein, and this video is the second in a two-part series that is designed to give you some additional background information on the various model utopian alternative communities that were springing up in the 1840s in America. And the goal here is to help you start developing this richer cultural context to understand where Thoreau's experiment in Walden fits in. And then eventually we'll be drawing some connections between these communities, Thoreau's experiment, and the lifestyle design movements of the 21st century. In the first video, I talked with you about a community and a movement, the Oneida community and the free love movement, that focused on exploring alternative ways of thinking about and experiencing love, sex, and relationships. Another one of the most well-known of these utopian model communities was Brook Farm. Brook Farm was founded in 1841 and went bankrupt in 1847. And it was located in West Roxbury, which is in Massachusetts and not very far from Boston. George Ripley, the founder of Brook Farm, said that the goals of the farm were to, and this is a direct quote, they were to secure a more natural union between intellectual and manual labor than now exists, to combine the thinker and the worker as far as possible in the same individual, to guarantee the highest mental freedom by providing all with labor adapted to their tastes and talents. Ripley's point about union is really important because the Transcendentalists and Romantics were very committed to finding ways of uniting the inner and the outer, or finding a better balance between the two. And they always seemed to sense that there was a problem if the external was disconnected from the internal. So I just want you to keep thinking about that as you're reading Thoreau. So in terms of Brook Farm, the emphasis was really on connecting the inner, this time as it manifests in our intellect, in our thinking, with the outer, this time as it manifests in terms of manual labor. As I mentioned in the videos on American Romanticism and Transcendentalism, the individuals associated with these movements were really sensitive to how the forces of industrialization and work could distort our being, our sense of self. And it did this by dominating our lives and by cutting us off from other parts of ourselves. So I want to help you understand this a little bit better by sharing with you some lines from Ralph Waldo Emerson's 1837 talk, The American Scholar. In The American Scholar, Emerson says, "Man is not a farmer or a professor or an engineer, but he is all. Man is priest and scholar and statesman and producer and soldier. In the divided or social state, these functions are parceled out to individuals, each of whom aims to do his stint of the joint work, whilst each other performs his. The individual, to possess himself, must sometimes return from his own labor to embrace all the other laborers. But unfortunately, this original unit, this fountain of power, has been so distributed to multitudes, has been so minutely subdivided and peddled out, that it is spilled into drops and cannot be gathered. The state of society is one in which the members have suffered amputation from the trunk and strut about so many walking monsters, a good finger, a neck, a stomach, an elbow, but never a man. Man is thus metamorphosed into a thing, into many things. The planter, who is man, sent out into the field to gather food, is seldom cheered by any idea of the true dignity of his ministry. He sees his bushel and his cart and nothing beyond, and sinks into the farmer instead of man on the farm. The tradesman scarcely ever gives an ideal worth to his work, but is ridden by the routine of his craft, and the soul is subject to dollars. The priest becomes a form, the attorney a statute book, the mechanic a machine, the sailor a rope of a ship. So Brook Farm really aimed to alleviate this drudgery and the way it caused our beings to become splintered and fractured. The work that you did at Brook Farm was really based on your affinity for this particular work. So if you like to do something, if there was something on the farm that you like to do, you were encouraged to pursue that interest. And there was also an emphasis on switching things up so that you avoided the drudgery that sort of inevitably comes from always pursuing one thing, even if it's just one thing that you love. So members of the community were really encouraged to engage in a variety of forms of work. A Unitarian minister gives a really good example of one way in which they united the intellectual with a form of manual labor that they would have to do as part of this community. And he says that they attached reading stands to ironing boards so that people could read as they ironed. Here's one of the problems. Most of the transcendentalists and romantics that we study today were coming from a highly educated, learned background and really didn't have much prior firsthand experience with manual labor. So they did really value the humble and rustic life of farmers, right? This is one of those things that you always hear when you learn about Romanticism, is that they really valued this type of lifestyle, but they were also kind of idealizing this kind of lifestyle. And we'll see when you're reading Thoreau, look for those moments where he idealizes this kind of work, but also where he realizes the limitations of someone who lives this kind of life. Now, idealizing this kind of lifestyle is not a bad thing, not necessarily, but when it came to actually starting to create a balanced life like this, where you were balancing the intellect with manual labor, well, that was a very different thing. And things got a lot more real. Let me give you the example of Nathaniel Hawthorne. You probably know he's a 19th century American writer. He's usually known for his work, The Scarlet Letter. He's one of the people who went and actually lived at Brook Farm. Just remember, Thoreau and Emerson never actually lived there. Later on, Hawthorne wrote another work, The Blithedale Romance, which is loosely based on his experience living at Brook Farm. At first, Hawthorne, when he was living at Brook Farm, was really into milking the cows. He found that enjoyable. But as one person points out, this phase of idealistic tourism quickly passed, and Hawthorne is reported to have said that he never suspected that farming was so hard and wanted to leave before his soul was utterly buried in a dung heap. And he left. So, I think it's noble, the attempt to live this lifestyle, to unite the intellectual with manual labor, but it actually proved to be very hard for people, not to start, but to maintain. Achieving and sustaining this kind of balanced life is so much harder than it seems at first. And this is something that I want us to be considering as we're reading Thoreau, as we're reading Walden, and as we're thinking about what he did while he was there and why he left Walden. Even though Thoreau never lived at Brook Farm, he is still concerned with the same underlying issues about work and its effect on our being and creating a stronger balance or a more dynamic balance between work and our beings as individuals. When you're reading Walden, I want you to think about these issues and start drawing some connections between what you're hearing and what you're reading and what you're thinking. So if you like this video, as always, I would love it if you liked it. If you haven't subscribed yet to my channel, I'd be honored if you did. And I'll see you in the next set of videos. Bye.